Imina Trenta Shatina Legislature in Guam is back from recess. We hope all our colleagues had a very good lunch. When we broke for lunch, we were on bill number 14-37 COR. And at this time, I will recognize the speaker again on the main motion. You may proceed. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, colleagues. And I'm standing in support of this bill. I'd just like to follow up on some of the questions that were raised by the Director of Land Management at the time, and perhaps make a couple amendments if I can. So first of all, in his testimony, the Director of Land Management, who was in support of the bill, said that he was suggesting the need for consistency in legal language and clarification on the status of off-island members attending virtual meetings for quorum determination. I don't see that addressed here, and I'm not sure it necessarily should be, but I just wanted to ask if the sponsor would yield if he thinks that is addressed in here.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Senator Parkinson, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, ma'am. No, I don't think that has been addressed here in the law. The way I kind of let this is I figured that this would be an open discussion of the body on what would be the best course of action, because I'm not opposed to it either way, but I think that should be something that we come to a consensus on, rather than something that be changed in committee. You know, rather than negotiate with ourselves in committee, let's hash it out here on the floor. So I am open to any changes or languages you think would be appropriate, but no, I agree with you. There's been nothing to address their concern.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Speaker Terlai, you may proceed.
Thank you for yielding to that question. I'm fine with that it's not addressed here and that it be addressed separately. I think that because that's the question for all boards, whether during emergency or not. So I'm okay with that. Just wanted to make sure I'm not missing it in here. And then he also, the other concerns that he raised, I think have been addressed by the bill, which include how to present documents and exhibits during these meetings, procedures for public participation, raising objections, and recording those objections in the meetings. I think they're sufficiently covered here. So when we had the last emergency, the public health pandemic, COVID, where we were not to meet together with each other, we had to scramble, and I think the Attorney General at that time finally came out with some rules for all the agencies to follow as to how to do it, because otherwise we were kind of jungle rules at that point, everybody trying just to make a way to get some business done that we could get done. So we did, I think there was an executive order that outlined some virtual meeting processes that we were able to follow. Us for the legislature, we had to set up our own procedures because, of course, these don't cover us here in the legislative branch. And I think we've tried to perfect those so that they are available and usable if that situation will rise again. So this is big because it allows for a virtual meeting in place of an in-person meeting for these public agencies if there's an emergency. But on page 4, where page 3 begins, 11103, authorization for virtual meeting, it says the public can have a public body can have a virtual meeting, while an emergency declaration that applies to that public body is in effect if, 1, the declaration prohibits, limits, or has the effect of prohibiting or limiting an in-person meeting of the public body. I'm great with that, because that emergency declaration by the governor will determine what is the emergency we are having, whether it's a health one or just, for example, a GMH. We were in state of emergency, you know, but we can have meetings there. So that distinguishing factor. But number 2, it says, 1, the governor declares that, or 2, the presiding officer of the body, of that public body, determines it's not practical or prudent for the public body to conduct an in-person meeting because of the emergency, I say no way. And B, that presiding officer communicates to the public that the meeting will be virtual or takes reasonable steps that the meeting will be virtual. I'm proposing, by one of my amendments, to delete this subsection 2 entirely. I think it should be such a significant emergency that is declared by the governor, and the governor should inform us of our parameters at that time, whether we are really having such an emergency that we cannot meet in person. And if not, then I don't think a presiding officer of any entity, in other words, a director of any department, should be able to make that determination on their own that they cannot meet in person. I think they should strive to meet in person unless this real type of emergency exists. I hope that suffices for an explanation, but that would be my first amendment. It would be to delete subsection 2, page 4.
On the motion to delete subsection 4 on page...
Subsection 2, page 4.
Page 4, subsection 2. Anyone wishing to speak on it? If not, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing no objections, motion carries. Speaker, you still have the floor.
Thank you very much. On the next page, page 5, this is under conduct of the virtual meeting. So there are some details here. They outline for every agency to follow how to conduct their meetings. And I like this because it will make them all uniform, hopefully. And the public is going to learn what is the procedure, and it will be uniform across all the agencies. And it pretty much mandates that we're going to be able to have a visual, like Zoom, you know, where audio and visual both work. And in fact, there's one provision that I really appreciate, and that says a person is present at the meeting. This is E. E says a member of a public body attends a meeting for all purposes, including quorum and voting, if throughout the meeting the member can see and hear and be seen and heard by other members of the public body who attend the meeting. That's in E subsection 1, and I think that's crucial. That is the crux. Whatever forum you have it in, Zoom or something, it has to be that if you're attending the meeting, we can see you. If you are voting, we can see you, and the public is able to hear you and see you throughout the meeting. Otherwise, we run the risk of, you know, they only show up for the vote part, they're not there for the discussion, and that's really part of the open government law. We want to know what is being deliberated, what is the discussion, that debate is done publicly before any vote. So because of that, I think that if you go up a little bit to subsection D, that should be deleted, because D says that if the public body or the agency lacks capacity to provide visual access to this virtual meeting, then they can do audio only. I feel like we have evolved far from the audio only meetings, recordings, and we now, I think, all conduct, in fact, our open government changes by Senator Brown that were made in past laws, they mandate that these are going to be broadcast live and recorded, the audios as well. So I guess I'd like to, well, I do, that's my motion, is to delete subsection D so that we don't go back to audio only, and that we mandate, as far as possible, both the video and the audio. And that would be compliant with subsection E as well.
So, Madam Speaker, just so that we're clear, the page number again and the lines?
Page 5, line
Yeah.
8 through 13, delete subsection D.
On that motion, anyone wishing to speak? Senator Fisher, you are acknowledged. You may proceed.
D. D is in dog.
D, okay, Delta. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm a little bit lost here. We are talking about the gentlelady's amendment, lines 8 to 13 on page 5. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. This proposed amendment would strike subsection delta, which begins, if a public body lacks the capacity to provide contemporaneous visual access. If such an agency, that does happen during a public emergency, maybe you can explain, maybe the proponent can explain this to me, Speaker. If the agency lacks the ability to televise it, stream it, whatever, may they still go ahead with the meeting under circumstance otherwise?
I'm going to ask the speaker if she would like to answer that, as that has been brought up to. Speaker, would you like to answer that?
Sure. So this one doesn't talk about televising. It talks about visual access to a virtual meeting. And so we have different platforms. I'm using Zoom as my example, that we have visual access on Zoom. That's why we use it, because we can see who's on there. We can see them when they're talking. And that visual access, subsection D says, these agencies don't necessarily have to have that they don't have to develop capacity to have visual access. And if they don't, then we can do audio only. Okay. I think that's going to be very difficult to really, for the public to participate and see who's talking. Part of it is what's their expression, right? And who are they addressing? All of that. So visual, I believe, is very important, and that's what subsection D allows them not to have. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Speaker. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the answer, Madam Speaker. So, just to put my mind at ease, if a public body cannot provide any sort of platform for visual access, whether that be live or by electronic means, the agency can proceed with audio only. That's my understanding. That's the. I guess I would just ask the proponent to just reassure me that they can go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Speaker Terlahi, would you like to answer that?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the question. According to this bill, subsection D would allow them to proceed audio only.
Okay.
But right now, our law says no such thing. It's going to be broadcast. Right now, for regular, non-emergencies, we must broadcast our meetings. And if they're virtual, then I'm saying they should be virtual. I mean, if they're, virtual meetings, that they should have video. So I'm saying the agencies must develop a way to do video. I hope this bill is actually a very great tool for the government to just develop an emergency center for meetings, right? Where we can all go and have audio capacity, where our telecoms are set up that way for emergency meetings during an emergency time, where we have video and also that's available to the public.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Fisher.
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you very much for that answer. I guess I'm more reassured by subsection F, Foxtrot, which anticipates a hearing by audio. That being present in sub Foxtrot, I think that legislative history would indicate that the legislature, under circumstances, approves of audio-only meetings. Anyway, that's my understanding. I guess I'll put that as a question in case the proponent disagrees with me.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Can you, I too had a question reference to that. So can you just repeat your question one more time so okay. I can ask the speaker if she'd like to yield for more clarity, please?
Sure. The proponent of the amendment proposes that we strike subsection delta D. And I was concerned initially that by striking delta, that meant there can be no audio-only meetings, in spite of the fact that the televisions and the internet and everything else has gone down. And I was concerned that this meant they couldn't hold a meeting. But I am more encouraged now by looking at sub Foxtrot, which says a member of the public body who attends a virtual meeting through electronic means that provide audio-only access to the meeting, etc. So the amendment anticipates audio-only meetings. Am I correct?
Thank you. You know what, Senator Fisher, I'm going to just take a moment's recess. Imina Chantashetina Legislature in Guam is back from recess. Senator Fisher, did her last answer help, or do you have a further inquiry in reference to this amendment?
I guess I don't have a further inquiry. I mean, I put the question like 4 different ways, and I do still have some time on the clock. I would just say that my understanding of the bill, the way I will approach the bill when it is time, if it becomes time to vote, will be that this does, in fact, allow audio hearings, audio public meetings under certain circumstances. And I just say that because I would like that to be in the legislative record. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Anybody else on the amendment? Senator Barnett, I will acknowledge you at this time. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam, for the acknowledgement. Good afternoon to the people of Guam and to my colleagues. I guess just to kind of help me understand the amendment, if I could pose a question to the author.
Please state your question. Thank you, Senator.
The question is, does this amendment essentially establish, for lack of a better term, Zoom technology as the floor for public meetings during the emergencies that are relevant to the bill?
Thank you, Senator. Speaker Terlai, on that question, would you like to answer?
Thank you. In my mind, yes, that is a good example. What capacity we are able to do by Zoom so that we have both audio and visual. My amendment takes out this public agencies using audio only in an emergency, in a health emergency. I think this is very important also, especially like in typhoons, right? Typhoon, there's no reason we can't have, after the typhoon, an in-person meeting. But like you said, we might have audio difficulties and technical difficulties, but for that type of emergency, we can have in-person meetings, right? So it's only for public health, something that's going to transfer from one person to another, emergencies, where we should be resorting to virtual only.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Barnett, does that help?
Yes, it does, ma'am. I can appreciate the intent of the amendment, and it kind of reminds me of my career as a Malfunction. So when I first came out as a Malfunction, all of our skits that we recorded were audio only. But and it's very interesting, the span of my career, we saw the technology evolve so quickly, where in the first year it was audio only, and then in the second year it became, what can we put on MySpace, and then it was YouTube. And so as the technology evolved, what had been the gold standard before, nobody was really interested in listening to an audio-only skit when you now had, video capability and all the different technology and the way it's advanced. So I definitely agree that the Zoom capability should be the floor in these relevant types of emergencies. And I also further support the portion of the amendment that requires members of these public bodies to actually be on the screen. As you guys know, we hosted a whole show centered around Zoom and the link in my days at KUAM, and there was, and I've seen it here in the body too, and I'm thinking of one specific director who I won't name, but this director had a real problem with turning on his screen, whether it was, speaking before the legislature or even in, speaking with the media. And we always kind of made the joke, like, is this guy, drinking a beer in his underwear? That's why I'm not naming the individual, ma'am, but I think that it's very important that we, in the name of decorum, and if you're attending a visual meeting akin to like a Zoom, then at the very least you should be able to be seen by the members of the public, especially given that these meetings are going to be taking place during emergency circumstances, ma'am. Si Diyos masi.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Parkinson, I will address you at this time. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. As I said in the beginning of this process, the crafting of the bill is open to discussion, to tailor to Guam, and this was kind of a blank slate when we came into it. And it's funny, the retiring speakers talks about technology, because that's something that has definitely changed my mind a little bit about some details of this bill, and that's why I support Speaker Terlahi's amendment, because technology was in a way different place when I introduced this bill. And so that's why we had provisions for audio only, because we kind of lived in a different world back then. But now we live in a world where AI technology has the capability to fake entire audio-only conversations to an incredibly high degree. And so looking towards the future and to what technology could potentially bring, I think it's wise to remove the audio-only component just for the security and to keep things safe, just to make sure that nobody ever tries to muddy the waters of the public discourse with fake AI technology. And so with that, I support this amendment, and I thank the good speaker for introducing it. Thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, Speaker Terlahi, would you like to close?
Zitos Masi, yes, and I know that throughout the bill there is reference to audio-only access to the meetings, and so I would allow, see on the bottom of my amendment, it says to allow legal and clerks to renumber and make technical corrections. They might have to adjust, for example, subsections B, C, and F. F says that if it's audio only, then this is what you do. And if my amendment passes, then I would suggest that those be amended by legal to accommodate. So again, Yeah, we're talking about emergencies where it's contact that we are afraid of and not necessarily, you know, mobility or anything like that. So in those, I would just hope that we can, you know, take full advantage of our technology today and be as closely consistent to our regular practices as possible, which include virtual meetings. We must record the recordings of our meetings and broadcast those. This does not have a broadcast component, so that's the difference, maybe, that this bill during those emergencies might not have to be, those meetings might not have to be broadcast like on how we have to broadcast, but they will be virtual and accessible to the members of the public. So yeah, that would be my amendment to delete subsection D and allow legal to make changes to B, C, F, and there's another section of the bill on page 6 that talks about audio-only access, page 6, line 16, and any others that she might see.
Thank you. On that amendment, is there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Madam Speaker, you still have the floor. For your third amendment.
So just thank you, colleagues. So on my final amendments on page 8, this is so earlier Senator Brown had deleted by her amendment section 11108, which is a rulemaking authority for the agencies to adopt rules. I supported that amendment because right before that is section 11107, which talks about notice and what must be provided in the notice. The notice must specify these 6 items. I would like to add 3 of the items that were deleted up into that notice requirement. And those 3 items would be the means by which a record considered in a virtual meeting is made available to the public body and if required by other law, the public. The record meaning a document, I'm assuming, and that, so just that, or a audio file, or yeah, pictures, anything like that, that is going to be discussed at that public meeting. I want that to be made available to the public, and so the notice that they send out should just indicate how the public's going to get access to that. So that would be moving, you know, the subsection 3 from 11108, which is now deleted, and putting that up there. The next one is to add that the means for access to a virtual meeting by an individual with a disability. That should not even be required to be put into this law because they have to do that, but we'll just put it in there as a reminder, like a checklist for them. And the number 5, the process by which a person may object. So this is one of those issues brought up by DLM, the director there, and so this just tells the public, well, actually this tells, it says here, by which a person may object. It's actually board members who can object. The public can't necessarily object during meetings, but if that is possible, they will give notice of it. And just to make that crystal clear, so that was my amendment, just to preserve those things that had been deleted, move them up into the notice requirement, and allow legal to make technical corrections to this as well to eliminate any duplicates.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Anyone wishing to speak on this amendment? If not, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. That exhausts the amendments.
Again, on the bill, this is good that we have these things in place prior to the emergencies this time, and I'm looking forward to a lot smoother emergency if there's such a thing. There are so many things. I just remember how almost dramatic it was to scramble, and that's the first time I ever heard of Zoom, was during that emergency, and we not only had to hear of it, learn it, decide which one to use, how it would apply to everyone, and so all of that. Having these rules in advance, I believe, are helpful. I really think, while I look at this bill, it's like if the government could set up one place to do this, we'd have the capacity. We've got definitely the telecom capacity to make like a central, high-speed internet that's going to work no matter what, and one where people would be able to avail of. So I thank again the sponsor for the bill, and I'm in support of the bill. Jesus mas.
Buen provecho, Speaker Therese. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Senator Parkinson, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. I appreciate my colleagues' support in this measure. I've always believed that ideas that go unchallenged grow weak, and this deliberative process brings out the best of all bills that go through it. And so I thank all my colleagues for their contribution to it. I agree with the retiring speaker that it's the best time to make plans for what to do in the emergency is not in the middle of the emergency. We put these processes in place so that when an emergency happens, we have a framework to already follow, and a framework that we were able to think together and put together logically ahead of time with no pressure or time constraints of an emergency urging us towards mistakes or missteps unintentionally. So to that end, I would like to make an amendment to add everybody in the legislature as co-sponsors to this bill, as this was a very collaborative process, and I thank you all for your part in it.
On the motion?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the bill to add all of the members of the legislature as co-sponsors.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries.
I'd also like to make a motion to add this bill to the third reading voting file.
On the motion to place the bill 14-37 COR as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor to the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. We're now continuing on second reading with Bill number 261-37 LS. Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 261-37 LS as introduced in the third reading file, and I wish to briefly discuss the measure.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 261-37 LS, introduced by myself, Senator San Augustine, along with co-sponsors Senator Dwayne San Nicolas, Senator Roy Canata, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Mooney-Barnes, Senators Jesse Luan, and Senator Tom Fisher, is an act to amend Section 4108C2B of Chapter 4, Title 4, Guam Code Annotated, relative to greater inclusion in sick leave policy. The definition of immediate family in the current law relative to government employees' sick leave only includes first-degree relatives being spouse, parents, and children, and second-degree relatives, brothers, sisters, grandchildren, and grandparents. With Bill 261, it expands the definition of immediate family members to include nieces and nephews, thereby recognizing the importance of familial relationships. This will allow an employee to assist his or her sibling taking care of their child when the parent is at risk of losing their job or is out of sick leave benefits and must return to work. Our laws must adapt to ensure inclusivity and support for all members of our community. All too often, we support fundraisers for family and friends who experience medical hardship. Many times, fundraisers are just not enough. When we understand the sacrifice and support required to get through difficult times, we know that it is in our island values of Azuda and Inagofli that makes our island strong. By expanding the definition, we not only extend a helping hand to our family members, but we demonstrate the core values of family that our culture thrives on, making our families' units stronger. I'm grateful for the support of the bill, co-sponsored, and look forward to discussing the measure and the support of all my colleagues. Jesus Marcy, Madam Speaker.
Jesus Masi, Senator, on the bill, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized? Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to stand and rise in support of Bill 261-37 LS. I want to thank the author, the good senator from Jigo, for allowing me to be one of his co-sponsors on this measure. And Madam Speaker, I just want to share that here on Guam, one of the sources of our community strength, and I've talked about it time and time again, is the extended family. For me, it lifts us up even higher in times of joy, and it offers more layers of protections and comforts in times of struggle. That is the reason why I support this concept, because when someone in our family falls ill, many of us on Guam are lucky enough that we have grandparents, grandfathers, godmothers, cousins, and siblings who are willing, definitely willing to step up and care for them. Perhaps because the parent works in a job that does not offer sick leave or has already exhausted their paid time off for the year. So, Madam Speaker, by granting the use of sick leave for government workers to take care of the sick children of their brothers and sisters, we are definitely leveraging what could possibly be the best leave policy on Guam to be even better for our community. That's what I like about this bill. It taps into our innate family values and the spirit of inat famaulik, interdependence, to help those who may not be in a position with such advantage. Madam Speaker, I'm also encouraged that the Department of Administration testified that it will issue the rules and regulations on how government employees can prove this familial relationship soon after this bill gets enacted into law. So, Madam Speaker, because this bill is a true reflection of our island values of helping out our extended families in need, and because of our HR professionals who are ready to implement it, I'm proud to stand in support of this measure, and I ask that our colleagues do the same. I want to say that, again, based on the public hearing, DOA said they were in support of that, and that they were willing to work and issue the rules and regs, and that there was also support from others that this proposed revision to the current regulations would greatly benefit government employees and their family as it extends to support to the children of siblings. So, Undankaluna Sijus Masi for giving me the opportunity to rise and speak about this measure. And again, I extend my thank you to the good author from Jigo for letting me be part of the co-sponsorship, as I myself have literally seen it where family had to step up to try and help. It really, 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 Madam Speaker, makes a difference. So thank you, and God bless.
Sister Masi, on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I attended the public hearing on this bill, and there's the other side to the coin. There's the positive side, certainly, if there's a need of a member of your family who needs sick leave and also works for the government of Guam, because they perhaps may have an illness that requires them to, in some cases, go off island or time to recuperate or whatever certainly the case may be. But there's the other side of the coin. And I've also had to deal with employees that felt under pressure because of the expectation of others who have worked very hard to accumulate sick leave. Sick leave, if I recall, and it's been quite a few years since I earned sick leave, but I think you get 4 hours a pay period. 26 pay periods in a year times 4. What, 13 days a year? It's about 13 days a year, I guess, that you're able to obtain sick leave. And it takes many, many, many years, obviously, to accumulate if you needed to be on leave for months on end for whatever the case may be of what your ailment might be. And so I think we just need to be mindful, colleagues, at the other end of the coin here. that it does get abused, and that there are employees, unfortunately, that are pressured to give their sick leave. Sometimes it may just because they feel guilty not providing it, that they transfer their sick leave. And the odds are fairly good, has been my experience, and I've run 3 agencies in this government, that the leave never gets returned. So if that, and I've had situations where employees themselves have needed, because they end up with a extenuating circumstance that they need to take leave, and they are not in the same situation. They don't have someone else that they're able to borrow leave, because in fact, some of the people closest to them have been able to obtain their leave. And of course you can say, well, they do it voluntarily. Well, some people do things that appear voluntarily because there's pressures and expectations of them to do so. And then they themselves, I've had employees who have ended up with no sick leave, who end up having to go leave without pay as a result of it. So while I recognize the goodwill, and there's some people over many years that accumulate, they're fortunate, they never get sick, and they're able to accumulate enough leave to give. And as one of the colleagues said, oh, I'm very happy to give my leave. But when you're in a situation where you may have done that, and then when your time comes and your time of need is there, and the people around you who've borrowed from you, or your family who's borrowed from you, are not able to pay back, then it's that individual, unfortunately. And again, I wish everybody well. But when someone has worked very hard to get what they have earned for their own circumstance, for the need, I mean, that's why we have a sick leave policy in place. We don't have it here for us here. I mean, we don't earn annual leave now. We don't earn sick leave. And unfortunately, I guess you can say, well, senators, you can take a whole year off if you want to, if you have an ailment, and it's not going to affect you because you don't have sick leave. But I think we need to be mindful, colleagues, that while we're doing this out of the goodness of our heart to do all these good things, there's the other side of the coin. And there are employees out there that are pressured, for whatever means it does. There are people, unfortunately, that because they don't want to be looked at as unkind or whatever the case may be, or they feel obligated, and the process now allows them to do it, they do it. And then when you ask them to realize what they're actually giving, sick leave is what you convert into dollars. That's what it comes down to. It's dollars and cents. You're essentially allowing the transfer of that. And you might go, well, hey, if they're going to do it, they should be free to do it. But let's not kid ourselves. These circumstances are not all in the best, goodwill being given. It puts undue pressure on these employees that actually work very hard to accumulate their leave for their own needs should it arise. And then when the time comes, you end up finding out that they're at total disadvantage. And they're the ones that have sacrificed and held on to their leave and not abused it. And then they're put under pressure to transfer that leave to give it either here in a family member, or you have cases in Government of Guam where there are other employees that are getting sick leave because of that. And I just think we need to be mindful of that. I'd love to live in a perfect world and think that everyone has the best of intentions and wants to do good things for Guam and each other. But that illusion disappeared many years ago. Unfortunately, because I've had to run agencies and deal with these challenges among employees that sometimes not wanting to harm anyone, they want to do the good thing, but then they're left at a disadvantage because it takes a lot of time to accumulate sick leave. I mean, 13 days a year don't quite cut it if you need extended medical care and you are not, you're still working, you don't have another form of income, and you're depending on that income to carry you during that time of your illness, and you need that support. Because I'll tell you, as we know, the bills don't stop. But I'm also for personal responsibility, and I really hate it when I see other individuals that are used or taken advantage of, or pressures put on them, and they end up giving their leave, and then they're left out in the dark when their time comes. And the support, unfortunately, nobody's breaking down the door to come in and provide them that assistance. So I think we just need to be mindful of what we're authorizing at the same time. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? If not, then sponsor may close on the bill. Senator Sinagus.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to bring a little bit of clarity in reference to my colleague that brought up about transferring of leave. The intent of this bill is to, if you're a government employee and it happens to be your brother who's watching his child, who's not included in the sick leave policy, is for you as a government employee. If your brother said to you, Chelu, can you help me? He says, how do you want me to help me? Can you come out and watch my child when I go back to work because I could lose my job? then they'll be authorized by this bill. They'll be authorized to sign leave to go and help the brother by watching his child. That's all this bill is about. I'm not, and I agree with what my colleague said. There's been pressure by other employees saying you got to give leave. No, you don't. Government employees put forward, don't give leave when you're being told to give. Give out of the kindness of your heart, nothing more. And with that, Madam Speaker, I just ask my colleagues to support this bill. And if anything, this bill be sent to the third reading file.
On that motion to place Bill number 261-37 LS onto the third reading file. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're going to take a 1-minute recess before the next bill.
Imina Trenta Shetina Legislature in Guam is back from recess. Colleagues, we are now on bill number 265-37, is authored by Speaker Therese Terlai. Speaker Terlai, you are recognized on the measure.
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker and colleagues, good afternoon again. I'd like to move that Bill number 265-37, COR, which is an act to provide tax relief to property owners of R1 and A zones by deferring increases in property tax assessment resulting from the 2024-2025 island-wide property revaluation. I'd like to move that to the third reading, and I'd like to discuss that motion.
You may proceed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Situs Masi, this bill was reported out by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement and Statistics, Research and Planning, and I'd like to thank the chair for having a prompt hearing on it and reporting this out. I believe it's a very important bill, and the timing is actually very crucial. So this bill stemmed from a notice that I saw in the newspaper where Reventax was soliciting an appraisal company to do the mass revaluation for Guam. This undoubtedly will result in increased property taxes for almost everyone. Well, I take it back. It will result in increased property values for almost all the properties on Guam. And unless you have an exemption from any increases, it's likely that you're going to be looking at an increase when that revaluation is completed and put into effect. Now, we know that by law, we're supposed to reevaluate every few years. However, we put that off in the 2024 budget. We took it out because we just coming out of a pandemic and a typhoon, and we did not think that this is the time to talk about raising real property taxes while we were trying to give energy credit relief and all other kinds, liquid fuels tax relief and other relief to the people of Guam because of the rising costs of everything. And it is getting very hard for them to maintain housing. All of these things acting together. But when I saw that solicitation, I had asked the Department of Revenue and Taxation, how are you able to go forward with this revaluation if we did not fund it? And they said the governor had given them money to fund the revaluation. So that's how they are proceeding. So I asked the director today for an update on the status of that procurement for an appraisal company to do the revaluation. And the status is that she says they are making progress with the evaluation process for that RFP and hope to complete the procurement in the next few weeks. So the procurement is not complete, meaning the company's not been hired and the valuation has not begun, but it is still moving forward. So this bill, since it's not our funds, and we tried to stop it by not funding it, but the governor has put ARP money towards funding a revaluation of property taxes. I tried to think of the next best way to stop increases of the increased tax assessment to these property owners. R1, residential, and A is agriculture with residents. So that's what the bill does. And I had put in two options, as those who went to the public hearing know. This was the bill that got the support of those who testified, and it did get significant support. This bill just says that if they do a revaluation, they can put that on the books. But your increase in property tax, give you will not be in effect, it will be deferred. This says, shall be deferred for these property owners until such time as the ownership of the property is transferred to other than an immediate family member, or the land is rezoned, or the owner is granted a new conditional use of the property. So for those who are just kind of continuing status quo, those are the ones that will be affected by this bill the most. They will not see tax increases if we can get this bill passed. We received testimony at the hearing from Jay Kinata of Vermilion Cave Farms, Monty McDowell from the Guam Association of Realtors, Gina Campos representing herself, Tewit Meresbang, Pacific Nation Equities co-founder, CEO, Monica Flores, Pratehi Lictetan, Savritidian, Melanie Guerrero, community member, and I'd like to thank them for testifying on this bill, and I hope I can get my colleagues' support or able to field any questions that they might have. Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Speaker Terlai. On the main motion, I see Senator Chadegui. You may proceed.
Madam Speaker, and good afternoon to my colleagues. Madam Speaker, I was one of maybe 3 of us who attended the public hearing on this legislation. It was a long night that night, if I recall. We were there, they were there for the very end of this bill, which was the last bill being heard. And I greatly appreciate those sticking it out to provide their testimony, to hear from the public. Madam Speaker, you know, we found every way possible to help our community deal with inflation, the growing cost of food, housing, and now we're here with property tax, considering to raise that. Madam Speaker, it was brought to my attention that from not just our congressman, but as well as our administration, that money's coming into Guam. We're going to be able to pay for a lot of the needs of schools, infrastructure, based on this military buildup, and according to the congressman, money that's been appropriated for us through the DOD. Not appropriate as to, it's actually appropriated to DOD. Let's make that clear. It's not coming to the government of Guam. But we will be able to receive some funding from that through taxes, and hopefully it will be captured through these contracts, as well as workers utilizing our restaurants and other shopping areas and et cetera, building up the GRT. But if you think about that, how's that going to help the average person trying to maintain their mortgage, trying to put food on their table? How is that going to help our public? It's not. It's just going to bring more money into the government. But is it going to bring more money to the hands of our people? So we, as a body, need to do something to offset some of those costs. I was just talking to a colleague of mine this afternoon, and it was ironic that just a small bag, small grocery bag, cost about $100 just for essentials, just about this big, was $100. You walk out of whatever supermarket or store and you're in a daze when you're getting in your car and look at, that's all for $100? We are seeing more people leave this island too as well. And that's the last thing we want to see happen. ensuring that we can do what we can to help our community. And this is one of those ways, especially when it comes to agriculture, those hardworking farmers, individuals who are trying to sustain themselves so they don't go to the grocery store and buy like a small bag of groceries for $100. A lot of them are retirees. They end up farming when they retire because it's just too doggone expensive to go to the grocery store anymore. This is a great opportunity, Madam Speaker, for us to do our part. I'd like to hold off on the evaluation altogether for another couple of years. I'm still curious too, Madam Speaker, if I can ask the author of the legislation, if even the $2 million that is supposed to be given to Ribbon Tax, if that can be used to do this reevaluation. Has that already been confirmed that the ARP funding is authorized?
I will ask the speaker, would you like to yield to that question?
If the question is that my answer is that according to Revenue and Taxation, they are receiving that ARP money. So whether it's legal or not, I'm sure DOA has made that determination that it is. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made that representation. And they've actually gone out for the RFP, and they actually are evaluating proposals. So they are moving forward in a serious way.
Thank you, Speaker Chalahi. Senator Tadegui, does that help?
Yes, it does, and it actually answers the second question I had with regards how soon have they started, because during the public hearing, we asked that question, how soon will this begin? And she said as soon as next week. So of course, it's been a few weeks since that public hearing, so now they're moving forward. Because the last thing I want us to do is end up having to pay that $2 million back to find out that art funding was used for something that was not authorized for. And then we would have to pull it out of our pocket once again. I mean, I'm still scratching my head on the borrowing part to GURA for $10 million from art funding. What does that have to do with COVID? So again, Madam Speaker, I greatly appreciate this bill. My other concern is that I'm worried that the governor may veto this bill. And if that's the case, then that's a failure on this government's part to assist these individuals who are still struggling every day. We're still struggling. Especially with the housing shortage, everybody was talking about the housing shortage. Now we've just added another layer of a few $1,000s or a couple more $1,000s to that cost of getting a home. It's all related. So I stand in full support of this legislation. Again, I wish that we just hold off on this for another couple years. People are still trying to breathe, and they're still being choked at the neck by the grocery store, by gas, by power, by water. And now, the biggest issue that's coming out is insurance. Insurance has tripled in cost. Tripled in cost. Some homes are no longer being insured because they can't afford it. That is huge. And I brought that up, I think, last session. Be prepared. Insurance costs are tripling in cost. So again, this would be a very helpful piece of legislation for our community. And I ask my colleagues to please support this and ask that I be a co-sponsor on this legislation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Tedegui. Senator Brown, on the main motion, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I certainly rise in support of this legislation and certainly commend the author for moving this legislation forward. You know, at a time when we brag how the government is awash in money and we have all this excess revenue that we are challenged here to spend, it just doesn't seem right. I mean, you can go on a schedule and say, oh, we're going to reevaluate every so many years and, you know, we're going to go do this. And there were many years the reevaluation never happened at all. But I think the timing of this pretty much is not a good time. I think already our people, and as the previous speaker had mentioned, that's the reality. I mean, the cost of living continues to go up. That's almost been the byproduct of this pandemic. While we received, you know, a considerable amount of federal funds into the island, we've also seen continued increase, except for meth. We talked about that not too long ago, how meth continues to drop. But everything else, everything essential that we need pretty much is going up. And when the subsidies for the power bill end, and it will end, and then now finding in our last session, we've increased and are helping the Guam Water Works increase the cost of water rates up to 71% over the next 5 years. And that's probably not the end of the story. Any other additional infrastructure requirements GWA has that they can't finance with their own income and revenue coming in is going to go back to the ratepayers of Guam. So there, two critical areas right off the top. Your power and your water bill is going to continue to increase, and they're going to have that burden. On top of that, my colleague mentioned, you know, insurance, that there's some homes that people are choosing not to insure. Well, if you still have a mortgage, I don't think the bank, the credit union, wherever you got your loan is going to allow you to not have insurance. That's almost a requirement. You're going to have insurance if your home is still under a mortgage. Certainly if you're no longer have any obligations on your home, I guess you can choose to do what you want and take that risk, but that's a sad reality. And also we see, all of us do, all the families out there when you go shopping for your groceries, see the continued increase of your food bill. Just your basic commodities that you would buy every week. And then you debate, do I buy that steak? Maybe that's not so healthy. Maybe I should spend that $30, $40 to buy that because I can buy something else with this money. And that's the real not everybody gets $30,000 pay raises. The rest of the island, and even those in the private sector that we know are out there, are still challenged. Not everybody's swimming in money. And there's no need at this time, I think it's fair to say, for this government of Guam that has been awash in cash, including justifications from directors that oversee our finances to justify their own $30,000+ pay raises, that I don't think the government needs more cash at this point. So I certainly support this legislation, especially for our middle class, hardworking people out there who are just doing the best they can to make a living and make ends meet in their family. I don't think they need at this point to pay more money to the government of Guam. They're not getting anything more. They're not getting better services. I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't feel it. Even when we ourselves, you know, my good colleague from Barragata, as he mentioned, sometimes dealing with the government, you know, as simple residents is very frustrating. Imagine at our level where we have a means and a podium to speak from. What about all of the thousands of our other people out there that don't have that opportunity and have to deal with frustration in dealing with their government, or frustration because of the services they're not getting? Pouring more money into this government has yet to demonstrate better efficiency and capability and support. I'm certainly open if anyone wants to show me what's improved in the basic services that people have asked for. Education? Question mark. Public safety? Big question mark. Health care? Even bigger question mark. Talk to the people that even work at the hospital about their frustrations with what's going there. Public health? Oh, we've seen the realities of that. So I just don't think this is a time to burden our people because we simply want to follow the clock and say, oh, let's go do another property valuation, raise rates, have the people pay more in their taxes, and give more taxes to the government. I think at this point, the government's so awash in cash that it would be just absolutely rude for us to ask the people of Guam to pay anything more at this time. So I definitely rise in support, and I hope, colleagues, if the governor does veto it, you know, let's put on our big boy and girl pants and override it. Because this is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. I mean, it's really going to affect people's pocketbooks, and let's not kid ourselves. The those that have all the money, maybe it doesn't faze them. People that are on subsidies, they get a lot of support. It's everybody in between that's struggling just to make it by that really is carrying the burden of running this community and running this government, and I just don't think they need another burden. So I definitely support this legislation. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Brown. Anybody else on the main motion? Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Sidos Masi, Madam Speaker, and thank you for allowing me to speak on the bill, which of course I do support. And also commend the bill's author for moving quickly to counter the effort which is already underway with the ARP funds. I was kind of thinking to myself when the retiring speaker was talking, and I believe the speaker had also been questioned about the eligibility and some of the allowable uses of the ARP funds. And I think I've learned in my first term here that as far as the eligibility with the ARP funds, the administration can spend it on anything except what we want to spend it on. And that's what I've learned about the eligibility of the ARP funds. Yeah, and you know, I don't even know if it's the middle class anymore. It's the little class because it's so little money to get by. So I absolutely do not support any effort to use this property assessment to raise taxes on our people. I mean, the retiring speaker hit a lot of nails on the head. She should be a carpenter. Yeah. Don't come and ask the people for more money and raise taxes on the people when, again, these and I'm just going to kind of talk about these raises. And remember, it was I who had asked the administration director about, you know, his $30,000 raises over the last, I mean, since we took office, this guy has got $30,000 increase to his pay. And what was reported in the media that this was just the beginning, that he was actually one of the first and that they were going to do an assessment of all the cabinet members, the directors, and then make a determination. And I can guess what that determination is going to say already. I think most people in here can. About, you know, I mean, let's not kid ourselves, not if they're going to get raises, but it's really a matter of how much. Meanwhile, a friend of mine's son, graduated from high school and has been working at a job for 2 years and, you know, really doing well at this job. And after 2 years of working at this job, this young man got a $2.50 raise that he was so excited about. $2.50. Coming from the private sector, it's pretty significant in the private sector. But we laugh at that. I mean, this is what we're giving the rank and file employees, but that's equal to $5,000 a year. And here we are shelling out $30,000, $35,000 raises, and those are just the ones we know about. And I think, you know, when we talk about public service, and Lord knows we can talk about public service because we're the lowest paid, among some of the lowest paid public servants in here. But I think it reaches a point, you know, when you're making 130, should be good already, you know? You shouldn't come back and say, give me another 35, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are already making significant salaries, getting increases that are driving the amount of money they're making per year. It's astronomical. I can't even wrap my head around how much you get on a paycheck if you're making $160,000 a year. And that's the world a lot of our government officials are living in. And it's a whole other universe compared to what world a lot of us are living in outside on the streets. And that's why I don't support this effort. I think, you know, we've got a lot of excess revenues that despite what some critics may say, we have been able to use in ways that really deliver a lot of relief to our people, whether it be the energy credits, or whether it be something that I still supported to this day, and that was the general pay plan increase for our hardest working government employees who didn't see any significant increase for many, many, many years. And remember, in order to make them whole, per se, with their stateside counterparts, the initial figure that we had heard was something that was being considered something in the neighborhood of a 40% increase, which, of course, is just not sustainable. And so I think the legislature has really done a lot of ways with the gas tax relief. I mean, we have been very consistent in trying to deliver as much aid and as much relief as we can to the people of Guam. And so I don't support any effort that really flushes that down the toilet. And I think you can't ask the people of Guam for more money when you've yet to demonstrate that the amount of money that you can use wisely, the amount of money that you have. And yeah, we get a lot of people who talk to us about, oh, throw money at these problems. And we've thrown money at these problems. But again, I think with a lot of these agencies, it isn't necessarily an issue of money. It's more an issue of management. And so, again, to me, it's not whether this bill can get 8 votes, but, realistically, it's whether it can get 10. Because I think it's very clear the intent of the administration will be to veto this bill and send it back down here. And I just hope that we avoid some of the scenarios that we've seen previously with the body where we stand united in passing a measure, we stand together in laying out what our policy as a legislature is going to be. And, then that policy comes to a skidding halt on the desk of the governor, lieutenant governor, and that vetoed bill makes a U-turn down here, and all of a sudden it's like, our members get amnesia and, do the cha-cha on their vote. Anyway, so it is what it is, Madam Speaker. So I hope that we can support this measure, and I hope that we're able to sustain a possible veto from the administration. Si Diyos Masi, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Senator Barnett. Anyone else on the main motion? If not, Speaker Therese, you may close.
Cesar Masi, Madam Speaker, and I want to first of all correct myself. Earlier when I read the title of the bill, I think I read an older version, and I referred to only A and R1 properties, but the bill has been amended by the committee. Thank you to the committee chair, and based on the testimony at the hearing, we suggested it be revised to include, this is how it's actually written. This will defer those increases in property taxes for owners of unimproved A or R1 zone properties, and defer for single-family and duplex homeowners on A, agricultural zone properties, R1, which is one-family dwelling zones, R2, multiple dwelling zones, C, commercial zones, or M1 light industrial zone properties used exclusively for single-family dwelling or duplex, with or without gardening and the keeping of pets for non-commercial purposes, and uses customarily accessory to single-family dwelling of duplex use, including home occupation and private parking areas with accessory buildings and structures. So this is just to expand for those property owners who really are just residential homeowners, but their lots are zoned much higher. This is just to help them as well, because an increase in commercial zone taxes is going to be quite significant after this revaluation. And so this is just to protect those who have a C zone property but are really just using it for a home and not for commercial purposes. So this again protects single family and duplex homeowners or unimproved lots in A or R1 zone. And again, thank you to my colleagues who spoke in support of the bill. We don't know. This was really quite a surprise for us. We didn't know that they were transferring ARP funds. We didn't know this was an eligible use of ARP funds to increase valuations and taxes. And we did not anticipate, or we've never been told, I was hoping the hearing, they would come down and just be very truthful with us and tell us exactly what they intend to do with the increased taxes or the increased valuation of these properties. For example, we are aware that the value of our properties, our real properties on Guam, affects our ability to borrow. And we did hear from the director of DOA in one of the sessions that we had before we heard about this revaluation that they are looking to borrow. But that was not, they did not talk about that in detail. We asked how we were going to fund certain things, and they said we would have to borrow, but there is no borrowing proposal in front of the legislature at this time. They've not come down at the hearing to talk about it. So it kind of leaves us, I'm sure the timing will be perfect of when we will be told, now we need to borrow. And that's why we raised all the property taxes and the tax assessments. So I'm just putting that out there because that's the information we do not know. And without knowing the purpose, without knowing why it's compelling, then I think that we should protect these homeowners, and particularly while we have this shortage in housing going on Guam. And while we continue to work on many other ways to address this housing shortage. We heard in, the news and maybe in the congressional address, I think if I can recall correctly, that the military is going to take care of their housing needs. And we have to be very aware of the impact of that on our current housing shortage and make sure that we are all on the same page in discussing this with them to ensure that these improvements can be made for all of the people of Guam. So again, I ask my colleagues to help me to support this bill, which would defer any increase in taxes for single-family or duplex homeowners on Guam after the reevaluation that is being pursued by the governor at this point. So I ask them for their support. Madam Speaker. Oh, I'm sorry. I asked for, some co-sponsors. I know Senator Taitakui had asked, Senator San Augustine, Senator Barnett, and Vice Speaker. Yeah. And Senator Brown. And please, Senator Brown, if she could be made third. All right, and on that, I will end and ask for
Senator Roy.
Senator Roy? Senator Nicholas. All right, well, I'll ask for all my colleagues. I hope they're all going to support this bill. I think this is a good move for the people, for the homeowners, for the housing shortage, plus for the Guam Legislature. Because if they do intend to borrow, they should be upfront about that. We should see what it's about. And we had no say in this raising of the taxes. Madam Speaker.
Buen Pobetso, Speaker, on the motion to put it on the voting file, please.
I reiterate my motion to place the bill. Make sure.
I apologize, Madam Speaker. On the motion to add the sponsors as noted, are there any objections? Seeing none, motion carries. Madam Speaker.
Yes. Move to place the bill 265-37 COR as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor into the third reading file. And I just want to point out to the clerk that I read the wrong title earlier, so we're correcting that title.
On that motion, without any objections, motion carries. Good job.
We will proceed. We're back from recess. We will proceed from on Bill 267-37 COR. Vice Speaker Muñoz-Barnes, you are recognized.
Si Diyos masi, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, if I may, at this time I would like to move to substitute Bills 267 on the floor with the version that was originally introduced and sponsored by a bipartisan group of 9 of us. And it's Bill 267-30 COR as amended by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement and Statistics, Research and Planning, and substituted on the floor as introduced by Tina Rose Muñoz-Barnes, Roy A.B. Canata, Christopher M. Duenas, William A. Parkinson, Jesse A. Lohan, Minority Leader Senator Frank Blas, Senator Joe San Augustine, Legislative Secretary Amanda Shelton, and Senator Dwayne T.D. San Nicolas, which is an act to add a new Section 5126.1 to Subarticle C, Article 2, Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code, annotated, relative to authorizing the Division of Public Welfare to join or use contracts of other states, other government procurement units, or not-for-profit entities comprising of one or more states or government procurement units. Madam Speaker, to the third reading, first to accept.
All right. So, colleagues, there's a motion to accept a substitute version of the bill versus the bill that was amended and reported out by the committee. On the motion, pardon?
No.
On the motion to accept the substitute version, is there any objection? There's an objection. All in favor of this, of accepting the substitute version, please raise your hand.
The explanation, Madam Speaker. To accept?
Yeah, motion fails.
Well, no. Madam Speaker,
sorry.
there's 8.
Clerk's giving me that look. So, could you please raise your hands again? Sorry. Yeah, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, and just in fairness to previously, the reason why this bill was being substituted because the measure contains substantive amendments that were not advocated for, let alone discussed during the bill's public hearing. And that's to those who had questions on why I wanted the original bill back. Madam Speaker, so that I move to move this bill 267-37 on as amended and further substituted on the floor to the third reading file, and I'd like to speak on it, please.
Please proceed.
Si Jus Masi, Madam Speaker, and thank you for giving me that opportunity. I introduced Bill 267 because I see an important opportunity that is within reach for the patients served by and the employees who drive our local Medicaid and MIP insurance programs. If only we give our government that means to take it, the Department of Public Health and Social Services, specifically the Guam Medicaid and MIP programs, are in the process of modernization, supported by its federal partners through funding through the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, which aims to improve data systems in the territories. Madam Speaker, the Division of Public Welfare adopted their strategic plan for Medicaid in September of 2023 to lay out their plan for this modernization, which will result in improvements in Medicaid and MIP. Their plan includes replacing a legacy system which has not kept up with the advances in technology and requires many manual processes that risk mistakes and non-compliance with mandatory timeframes and processes. Madam Speaker, Ed Dolly, the Director of the Division of State Systems and at the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, which is CMS, who came before this August legislature at nearly midnight his time to express in support for this bill, urged Carlos Pangilinan, the Division of Public Welfare's Chief Human Service Administrator, to, quote, leverage cooperative purchasing through multi-states or territory collaborations, General Services Administration, multiple awards schedules, the MSAs, and nonprofits like the National Association of State Procurement Officials, the NASPO, the CMS supports NASPO's Value Point Cooperative Contracts. As a result, has approved the supporting requests for procurements, the RPs, and master agreements. Under current law, there are 2 entities that are explicitly authorized to use cooperative procurements, Madam Speaker. Right now here in Guam, the Women's, Infants, and Children's Program and the Bureau of Economic Security, both under the DPHSS. Again, this is no stranger to Guam. It is already being utilized for 2 programs out of the many at the Department of Public Health and Social Services. Bill 267, Madam Speaker, would extend that existing authority to the Division of Public Welfare, which administers the Guam Medicaid program and MIP on behalf of the Department of Public Health and Social Services. CMS has spent hundreds of millions in federal funds to design and develop Medicaid enterprise systems, which are built with features to make sharing, leverage and reuse of those systems possible. When states and territories design, develop, install, or enhance qualified systems, the federal government provides 90% of the funding and 75% of the funding for operating those systems after they have been installed. Non-compliant systems are only eligible for 50% of the federal funding. This 50% federal funding is what our current system is eligible for. So although, Madam Speaker, the price tag for the system the Department of Public Health and Social Services is seeking may be higher, our local matching funds will be cut in half. Additionally, the systems will have much better efficiency, including fully automating services like updating customer information, eligibility service, and even claims services. When the Division of Public Welfare is able to obtain these systems through cooperative purchasing, they can select systems that have proven themselves in other states or territories. On top of the savings, local funds through higher federal investment, Madam Speaker. And without a doubt, this, Madam Speaker, gives our people more and better services for fewer local tax dollars being spent. Our job here at the legislature is not only oversight, but we also need to provide resources for our agencies to be successful. Applying this existing approach to these systems, such as these, are allowable in almost every single state and territory. Madam Speaker, because there have been concerns raised about the waivers to local procurement law that are part and parcel of these joint use agreements, I want to assure my colleagues and the public of one important fact. These systems have already gone through a rigorous competitive bidding process when they were procured by the original state or territory. In addition, as confirmed through the testimony provided by CMS, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, they are required by regulation to review procurements and contracts related to these IT initiatives. So on top of any local procurement mandates, these contracts must also obtain the sign-off of the federal agency that is granting these funds. Madam Speaker, to illustrate this point further, Mr. Gary Smith, the Medicaid Director of the U.S. Virgin Islands, who also stayed up really late to testify live during this bill's public hearing, told us, quote, "The awards through cooperative purchasing already have gone through the competitive bidding process, meeting GSA's federal standards." I offer these facts, Madam Speaker, to help the public and my colleagues understand that we don't need to recreate another exhaustive procurement process to follow. That's the last thing I want to do to the good folks at the Department of Public Health and Social Services, is to take this good idea, which has already worked and again, I already say that it has already worked for our WIC and our EBT programs, is to unintentionally create barriers to success and march them down here for an oversight hearing on why this Medicaid system is taking so long to procure, when we should know that we instilled these delays through legislation. In closing, Madam Speaker, while I appreciate the practice of keeping local dollars on island and supporting local businesses when our federal grantors that manages $760 billion in funds spent over the country to tell us that this is the best practice, we as local legislators, Madam Speaker, should please, humbly please, listen to it. I am humbly asking that we as lawmakers provide the Guam Medicaid Office the ability to procure the most efficient software and other services that are approved by CMS, allowing us to give our members the opportunity to use the best technology available in the Medicaid space. Madam Speaker, I still have 6 minutes left, and I just want to share that there was an amendment that was approached by Public Health to include all the other programs, but at the request of what CMS asked of this August body through Public Health, I ventured to work on this and wanted to make sure that this is the request and that we make sure that we look at this legislation and give it its best consideration, because we don't only save time, we save money. Our thousands and thousands and thousands of Medicaid and MIP recipients would get better processing time, faster payments, faster coverage, and again, at the request of CMS and at the opportunity for the Virgin Islands to literally present positive testimony on why it works in their area, why reinvent the wheel? I hope my colleagues literally take the time to support this measure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to bring this measure forward and to help public health in their program. Sijus Masi, and thank you for giving me the time.
Sijus Masi. On the bill, Senator Taitui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I was looking forward to listening to the debate on this particular bill. It was brought, one media group was very concerned about it too as well. I was at that public hearing, and I was just curious, as the gentleman who came in front of us via Zoom, whether he was a nonprofit organization standing to make funds from making money from doing these applications. And it really wasn't that quite clear. Anyways, the reason why I objected was because it's kind of not fair right now that the oversight chair of this committee who put out this substituted bill is not here to defend herself. I'm looking forward to listening to the discussion to hash this out and finding out what's going on. Usually, the committee chair is hardly, if you look at her record, she's always here. And especially for something like this. So I was able to retrieve a letter that was written to the media group who was asking the senator as to why these amendments were changed. And those who voted to put this bill on the agenda, I hope you clearly hear this. And Madam Speaker, I would like to submit this for the record too as well, so that everybody has this and can look at this. It was addressed to a media group. I don't need to mention who it was, but it says, "Thank you for your questions. I fully support the intent of the bill to leverage contracts with other government procurement units to gain access to CMS compliant IT systems that would facilitate healthcare access for our community. The issue with Bill 26737, as introduced, it is exemption from Guam procurement law altogether, which means lack of transparency and accountability with vital taxpayer funds. And that was in bold. As a government, we need to exercise due diligence to ensure that the contents Government of Guam enters into is fully vetted, even with apparent benefits.
Madam Speaker, on a point of information, please.
State your point of information.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the person referenced by the senator from Tamuni is Edward Dolly, Director of the Division of State Systems for Centers of Medicaid and Medicare Services. So he is not a nonprofit representative. He is an employee of the federal government, CMS, and he is recommending we adopt this bill. And he testified, I applaud the territory for considering the opportunity, and I want it in my strongest and most possible terms. I can encourage the thoughtful consideration of and meaningful adoption of the ability to do and exercise those types of contracts and contract vehicles. These, Madam Speaker, already exist in the WIC and EBT, as I noted earlier. And the good senator from Barragata Heights shared with me the other day that she understands that the restrictions that were put, and you can call it to the test, that they were too restrictive, and that I, no pun intended, said I will introduce the original bill as introduced. So, Madam Speaker, on a point of information, I want to clarify that Edward Dolly is the Director, Division of State Systems for Senators for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and the testimony of Gary Smith is the Medicaid Director for the United States Virgin Islands.
Thank you. I don't remember a reference, but please proceed. Senator Teichgui.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, see, that's why I think it was important to have the committee chair be here to justify why this bill was amended, and also bring into attention other things that, someone standing up making comments about, an individual who, a nonprofit, maybe she can clarify that too as well. But if you ask me, I mean, you can hire, the federal government can hire individuals on contract basis and say that they work for the government, but yet they're still an individual company. So let me go back and finish this letter so that the listening audience can see why she's done this. So again, we talked about, as government, we need to exercise due diligence to ensure the contracts the Government of Guam enters into is fully vetted, even with apparent benefits. Bill 267-37, as amended, protects the public interest by ensuring that public health clearly identifies the needs, terms, and conditions, deliverables, and does the market research of available option to determine the best value in meeting those needs. Market research is a best practice that supports, and in parentheses, the contracting officer must determine in writing that the other jurisdiction's contract has gone through a competitive procurement process, unquote. That is included in the introduced version of Bill 267-37. Additionally, specifications that are not fully developed can lead to additional avoidable charges due to change orders that market research can't prevent. I'm just going to take a pause here and remind my colleagues that the committee chair attended several procurement classes at GCC to understand procurement. I don't know if anyone else in here has attended any classes for procurement and understand how it works. It is very difficult to understand. But the oversight chair has attended these classes. She took her time and due diligence and personal time so that she understands it completely. Another issue, moving on, another issue with Bill 267-37 as introduced, it is lacks requirements pertaining to cost and reimbursement. On the contrary, it attempts to this particular procurement from cost reimbursement regulations and oversight of the AG for procurement over $500,000. Additionally, the bill as introduced does not contain a cap for expenditures of public funds or the requirement for sufficient funding to be available. It is critical with limited public funds that safeguards are in place to ensure contracts are sufficiently reviewed to ensure fiduciary responsibility and to avoid financial liability. Other issues with Bill 267-37 as introduced is that it exempts key safeguards of expenditures of public funds such as ethical practices, procurement competency, procurement record, review of the procurement record by the public, review and audits by public auditor, and compliance with federal requirements. And then she has in bold, without safeguards, remedies in the event of the failure of a cooperative contract may be lacking to protect the public interest and funds in spite of good intentions and said benefits. That should make everybody think twice. Procurement of IT has added challenges, as was witnessed with the procurement of the new FMIS system. Interoperability is critical to ensure seamlessness in service. It is commonly known that costly data issues can occur when interoperability between data management systems does not exist, or it is not sufficient among many scenarios when transitioning from using one system to another. These errors are avoidable by establishing interoperability, typically leveraging application programming interfaces, in parentheses, API, as required future in the technical specifications of procurement for data management systems. That tells you she knows her stuff, because it can get kind of confusing here with regards to procurement. Moving on, to be clear, this is to prevent errors during the transition, to allow for fluid integrations during the useful life of the new system, and to prevent the new system from being held hostage by a vendor/provider in the future, and to future profit the newly procured system. It is true that there exist new systems that provide backward capabilities, commonly referred to as data warehouse, data lake, and data cloud services. Interoperability with the current system means that the providers of a new system should provide the service of ingesting critical data from the old system in an accurate and timely manner. This does not require negotiating with the current provider for new work to be performed. The language of the Bill 267-37, as introduced, mimics language from the previous section in procurement law that lacks safeguards needed to protect vital public funds. The framework for Bill 267-37, as amended, is taken from sole source procurement law that engenders due diligence on the part of purchasing agency, in this case, public health, before exercising the special authorization of joining with another government unit's contract upon promulgation of regulations and further guidance by the policy officer. Wow, okay. So Bill 267-37, as amended, protects the public interest. And it is what the committee voted on, and that is now on the June session agenda. I would like to add that I have worked successfully with the main author, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, and my colleagues to pass important legislation authored by Vice Speaker, such as Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, an advance payment for the Guam Public Library System that has enabled GPLS to join the 21st century and promote literacy for all. I look forward to continuing the positive collaboration with Vice Speaker, co-sponsors, and my colleagues to ensure that public interest is protected and expand health care access within our community. Sincerely, Senator Sabina Flores-Perez. Now, if there's anybody in this body that is trying to be so sincere, forthright, and has nothing to hide, nothing to gain, but for what's in the best interest of the people of Guam, it is this committee chair. Many of us go to Senator Perez when we have a question about procurement, when we're unsure. She might not always have the answer, but most of the time she does. And the best part is she knows where to look it up. And there was a serious problem with this original bill. And that's why these changes were made. You know, it was nice for the individuals to come at, midnight to come on air and speak to this body during the public hearing. Thank you for that. But we have laws that are put in place to protect the people's money. We have procurement laws that have proven to keep the best interest at hand, and that is the people of Guam's funds. We could even ask the public auditor to come in here and chime in on something like this. I'm pretty sure he would have a whole lot more to say, but I think he would agree with Senator Perez about procurement law and the importance of transparency, accountability. One of the comments that were made earlier is the safeguards. It was reiterated that this amended version, not the original, was a key to safeguard of expenditure of public funds, such as ethical practices, procurement competency, procurement record, review of procurement record by the public, reviews and audits by the public auditor. So these are the reasons why, and I again, I know the intent of this legislation was for the good. But we have to do this right, else we're going to be sitting in this room again having to repeal a bill because those safety measures are not included. And again, you know, why can't we hold off until the oversight chair of this committee to explain herself? A lot more eloquent than I can about procurement, because many of us don't know a whole lot about procurement. So I thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair, to read the committee's chair's letter that she responded to a media outlet here on this island and asking her why. And I think she explained it very well in this letter. So I thank you for the opportunity, Madam Speaker.
Still Smossy, Senator, on the bill. Is there any other one? Senator,
On a
like
point
to
of
be recognized?
information, Madam Speaker.
Point of information? Please
Yes,
state your point of information.
Just based on the
Please,
impetus of this legislation and
No
why it
debate
was-
allowed. Just what is the point of information? Yes.
I just want to say that the original author of the John Deere legislation is the public auditor, B.J. Cruz.
Jesus Maasi. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, are you going to speak? No, you go ahead.
Senator Sanarkasin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I was reading the bill that was submitted by the committee, and then I was doing comparison now with the substitute bill. I'm trying to understand all the statements made. Yeah, you know what? We can talk all about you went to school for this and that. I ran a procurement office in the military. In the military, we have a different way of doing business. But we're more technical than even the government in Guam is, or the government in general. Because on many occasions, you find the federal government mirrors the military's procurement process. And, you know, as I read the two, if you compare the two bills, not just what anybody says, but compare the two bills, you find very little difference. Other than summarizing it and bringing it to terms of what it's saying. And on this substitute, the gist of this whole substitute is on page 3 and 4, nothing else. And if you look at the bill that was amended, all they did was merge them together as one. The process still has to go through the procurement process. I don't care if you went to school all your life on procurement, doesn't mean anything to me. Practicing is one thing, going to school is another. And for folks that have degrees, they'll tell you that things taught at the university or any other schools is in theory. When you go to reality, it tells you how you can apply the theory concept or not. And on many occasions, it's not applicable. But I just say that, you know, I'm a co-sponsor of this bill, and I support the way the substitute is written. And I move forward on that, and then we'll see what we need to do, if we need to do anything in the future. And then we'll move on. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, did you have your hand up, Senator? Okay, sorry. Senator Barnett, you're recognized. Senator San Nicolas, I'm trying to. Senator San Nicolas, did you have your hand up? Did you? No. Okay, so Senator Barnett or Senator Brown? Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I'm still undecided on the bill, but I am just noticing a lot of the rhetoric that's been playing out in the media about the bill, and also didn't appreciate having our picture plastered out there with the label special interest when I never even spoke on this bill. I'm still trying to understand it. And it just makes me wonder, you know, the intent of when you see this much effort pushing a certain way, and it just makes me question things. But I did have a question for the main author of the bill, if she would so yield.
Please state your question. Yeah.
It was mentioned in the open that 2 other departments within the Department of Public Health and Social Services are availing of this type of procurement, I guess. And it was mentioned, I think it was WIC and then another one. So if we had to pass if we're entertaining a bill to allow that for the procurement with CMS and Medicaid, does the author know if previous legislation was proffered and passed to allow those other 2 departments to avail of this arrangement?
Will the sponsor yield to that question?
Yes, as I noted on the point of information, yes, the author of the legislation was then Speaker B.J. Cruz, who was the author of the legislation. But EBT and WIC are part of the program. And it was recommended by CMS, who is not a nonprofit, it's a federal entity, that this be done for CMS.
Senator Barnett.
Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, for myself, I'm going to go back and look at those laws and just see exactly how similar they are. But like I said, I'm undecided on the bill. But I do want to also speak a little bit on the committee work. You know, I think this particular session is it's been a little troubling in how we're demeaning and in some ways just going right in and interfering with the committee work process. And, you know, it just kind of makes me scratch my head. I mean, is the end goal here just to do away with the committee process? Because, again, in many times, and not just with this particular committee chair, but with all the committee chairs, I think there's a certain amount of respect that at least I, for myself as a member, give to the committee chair relative to their, you know, expertise and their relationship with the different agencies they have oversight of. And I too had read the letter that this particular committee chair had written to this certain media outlet in response to a lot of the questions that they had sent, and even an accusation about meeting with the lobbyist. I didn't even realize, like, they sent this email to everyone, and so again, I saw a report that said that they didn't get a response, so I was sure to be, I didn't meet with anybody on anything about this bill. But again, you know, with the committee chair, she's very diligent in her work. You know, I'm not exactly the most educated person, but I'm not going to be one who is going to just dismiss someone's education, someone's schooling. I think it goes both ways. You have some people who, you know, might be book smart and not common sense. Then you got some people who have a lot of common sense, but not necessarily the book smart or the academics that they need. So, but I think in this particular case, Senator Sabina, I think, she does know a lot about procurement. She's taken all the modules, and I don't think that's anything to dismiss just outright. And I do respect the work that she does as a committee chair. And you know, I think it was very telling that she was able to respond to this inquiry in such a detailed manner and provide what I felt was very justifiable reasons for the work that she did in the committee and the bill that she turned out. That, you know, unfortunately isn't being entertained at this time. So, yeah, I want to sit back and listen and do a little more research on this issue, ma'am, but I did want to kind of just ask that question of the author and then also lodge on the record my support of the committee's work, all the committees in the legislature, and my respect for that process as well. Sidos Masi.
Sidos Masi, on the bill, is there any senator who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Brown, you're recognized.
You know, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm also kind of in the middle of the road on this legislation and probably would like more information. I understand the intent of what was elaborated here as to maybe the need and the benefit Guam can receive from pursuing and having this legislation in place. But at the same time, you know, we're at a disadvantage because the committee chair is not here to elaborate on what the recommended changes, why she made the recommended changes versus the original bill. This is not a very common thing. It's probably the first time I've seen this in the legislature in all my time here. And maybe there is no big deal, but the fact that this process has kind of changed and gone in the reverse direction, you know, makes me have a little more questions that I would like to have answered, especially when you are dealing with procurement and you're dealing with a substantial amount of, while federal resources are providing for this, and we're hearing that this is an opportunity that we can take advantage of and federal officials are recommending it. I think because it's not something we are all as familiar with, I would certainly like some information. I did want to ask of the author, because I see one thing, it's other government procurement that we're able to piggyback on other existing government procurement that may be happening in other states. It doesn't elaborate what states we may be doing. Perhaps if the sponsor has some information. And then also with regards to the non-for-profit entities, who are these non-for-profit entities that may also undertake this work with regards to government procurement? Perhaps if the sponsor could answer those questions, that might be helpful.
Would you please restate the question, Senator?
It indicates in the legislation here that essentially the intent is to be able to piggyback on other government procurement, that this help facilitate for Guam, it would cut our cost. I'm just curious, what states are we talking about that we may be piggybacking on? And then with regards to these not-for-profit entities, who are these it's one thing having federal, state, government procurement, but when we get into who are these non-for-profit entities that may be also able to execute this? Who are they? Where are they? Because I assume they're non-government entities. Who are they?
Would the sponsor yield to that question, those questions?
Madam Speaker, it's any state that has CMS approved systems, and the CMS the Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medicare and Medicaid Systems, which is in Maryland. It is the part of the federal government, and the need for this, Madam Speaker, on this legislation was because Medicare and Medicaid are not included in the system that already has with EBT and WIC. In as far as nonprofits, the National Association of State Procurement Officers is the National Association of State Procurement Officials, which is, as I said earlier, is NASPO, is a nonprofit association dedicated to advancing the public procurement through leadership, excellence, and integrity.
I appreciate the response by the sponsor. I'm not quite sure who the nonprofit entities are, but maybe we'll have time before we have to address this bill to talk with the public auditor, and maybe I could get more information. But I do want to elaborate on our previous speaker's comments here on the floor, and I'm going to use my time to do so. Because I agree, Madam Speaker, I don't know if it's Target Senator Sabina Perez week or whatever the case may be, but you know, these comments on the floor that try to diminish her capabilities or her expertise is a little concerning. I mean, she's not here to defend herself, but since last week, I think we've heard that. And I do respect those that have worked hard to either through work, effort, and experience, or if they've gone on and gotten their degrees and their expertise. I think there's something to be said for that, because it takes a lot of time and effort, sacrifice to accomplish that in one's life. And I just, when I hear these comments on the floor that that's like no big deal and we just get to whisk it away, so we therefore ignore the work and effort of the oversight chair. And it's not just that she happens to be a member of our body, but she is the oversight chair that has jurisdiction over these particular issues. And when we simply want to wipe away all those efforts, diminish her expertise and capabilities as if they're inconsequential, you know, those are direct attacks. And I know Senator Sabina is a very quiet, far more reserved, probably than anyone on this floor. But I give her credit for standing her ground. Unfortunately, she's not here today to do that. And so, you know, I just feel, colleagues, please. I mean, unless you have those yourself, and I don't know anyone else here who has taken the modules for procurement in the government of Guam. And I don't know anyone else who has her credentials. I don't. So I just think we need to be a little mindful with that. This dumbing down appearance that seems to be going on really is unbecoming. Yes, my Vice Speaker, it is unbecoming. I mean, the public should hear all our comments while we're commenting, while other people are talking on the floor, that they can get a good idea, really, of what's going on here on the floor of the legislature. Because when we want to target someone, we want to target them, we want to target, especially their credentials. And I respect that, because I know it takes a lot of work and effort, especially people that have to do it while they're working, to work on getting their professional credentials, or working in school, or working to get their degree. That's nothing to, you know, act like it's no big deal. Who cares? And that's the kind of attitude that's coming across here, especially when the person we're talking about is not even here to defend herself, even though last week I think she did a pretty good job while she's being heckled on the floor of this legislature by grown adults. So that's all the comments I have, Madam Speaker. I hope we're able to get more information. I think certainly should there be no concern on this bill, it sounds like a very good concept, but our inability to get feedback from the chair, and then also, like I said, perhaps I need to have a conversation with the public auditor. Hopefully I won't get FOIA'd, because I'm going to go talk to the public auditor to get his take and his feedback, since he's not here to respond to those questions that we may have with regards to this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to comment.
This is Mossy. Senator Brown, on the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? Senator Nicholas, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I kind of see where we're going with this. So at first when we started discussion, I was like, I didn't even understand the bill, quite literally, and I'm just being honest. I just wanted to find out what exactly we're trying to do. And so I read up dummies, procurement for dummies. Just kidding. I went outside and I got some information as to what exactly we're really trying to do here. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to procure, we're going to allow them, the government entity, to procure whatever it is and piggyback off a current contract of something that has already been done. And so there was an example that was given to me earlier where a state went full on, went through all the contracts and everything, and paid somewhere upwards of more than $100 million. And then there was, I think the example was the Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico, who piggybacked on that same contract that state had already gone through the vetting process, has gone through the procurement, and so they paid like $20-some million, which is a fraction of what the original state, which they were piggybacking on. And I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. Then I also asked and inquired, and the previous bill wanted to piggyback on the other states' bills, other states' contracts, but there was a stipulation in there that it had to go through Government of Guam procurement procedures, which is, everybody knows how hairy that can be. But it seems to me that this bill, what it wants to do is and I just, just because we want to make things easier and move things along and allow for procurement doesn't mean that we're corrupt, or we're doing something illegal, or doing something that destroys the trust of our people. I think it was Charlie Munger who says, deserved trust is one of the best things in the whole wide world. And the people have entrusted us, and I think I wouldn't want to jeopardize that deserved trust. And so that's why I made every effort to try to understand what this bill really, really wants to do, because I too want to facilitate faster procurement of anything that we need, so we can better service our people. And it seems to me that so we are authorizing our government entity to piggyback with states and other governments, procurement units, or nonprofit entities comprising of one or more. And not all non-for-profit entities they're not all made the same way. But one of my favorite ones is I think it's the Salvation Army. I love the Salvation Army. And so let's say the Salvation Army had procured a software or something. Our government entity would piggyback with them, and of course they had vetted, gone through all the processes. Everything was done as best they could with the Salvation Army. For example, we would piggyback on them, with them, and purchase whatever it is that we need based on that contract, their original contract with that non-for-profit. I think it's a great bill. I think it's a great bill, and it's unfortunate, yes, that Honorable Senator Paris is not here, but I think I understand the legislation now, and I think it's a good measure. And I think any time when we can piggyback on another government entity or another state, or maybe perhaps again with a nonprofit, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to jump on the contract that's already existing And I think that's a great thing. And if we can speed up delivery of services for our people in this manner, I think it's a great thing. And I applaud the author. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Is there any other senator who'd like to be recognized on this bill? Senator Barnett.
On the main motion, is there anyone who wishes to speak on the main motion? Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi. This bill, the intent of this bill, the theory behind this bill is excellent. It's going to bring benefits to Guam. It's going to cut costs, hopefully. That's the plan. It's going to make our system more efficient. I think the only contention that we are actually having here today is the process. And so the initiative of public health and the personnel there that push this forward, I applaud that. Of course, our former colleague, Speaker Cruz, and who's now the public auditor, when he was Senator passed a bill to do very similar with another part of the Department of Public Health. So the theory is great. But what I think has evolved since then is that we just know a little bit more about the procurement law now. And while we are trying to get around some of the prohibitions of the procurement law by this bill, that's why it's needed, otherwise they would have done it. I don't think it's necessary that we get around all of the procurement law, and I think that's what the committee chair was trying to do as well. And as we heard earlier, she outlined the segment, the bill says all of the procurement law will be waived, but in its place, it gives very little parameters. It just says we're going to contract with other states, but I just think that there are some factors in there that we as the government of Guam, for our protection and for our explanation to the people of Guam in future years when the personnel at public health changes, we would want to understand which choices they made and why. So for me, there are certain parts of the procurement law that I find very important. And as was pointed out by the committee chair. And so we see that at the public hearing, of course, CMS approves that we should get into a contract that is already CMS approved. That's great. And that's what we are going to do. I don't think CMS would have had much objection to us doing this in our way. In other words, ensuring that ethical standards are maintained, the ethics parts of the procurement law, or that we ensure that we have a procurement record. I very much doubt CMS would have any objection to that, because that procurement record is what we're going to use if there is any dispute. It's what we use to ensure we are transparent with the public. And there are parts that were in the amended bill that I also like that talked about does this bill, by waiving, making it exempt from the procurement law, exempt it from review by the public auditor? So I think the public auditor might share. I've asked him, he said he has not reviewed the amended bill, but I think he might share some of those concerns as well. And then, colleagues, we agree on the theory that if it's going to bring benefit to the people of Guam to partner with another state, let's do that. But I just don't see why we have to do that without knowing what we know, which is that personnel changes. So the person who we're talking to today at Public Health might not be the person who actually does this procurement, might not be the person who 5 years from now we can get an explanation when the contract's not working. Why did we go that way and not this way? Why did we go with that state and not this state? Both were approved by CMS. Was this really a good deal? Could we have got a better deal? Those types of questions are what we should always be looking for as a government. That's why the record, to me, is very, very important and necessary. And because there are different states, and it says that we're going to get, by this bill, given a choice to join or use the contracts of other states, other government procurement units, or not-for-profit entities comprising one or more states or government units. It seems to me there is a choice for us here, and that's what procurement's all about. So among these choices, how is that choice going to be made? How's that decision going to be made? And I'm not trying to make their decision, but I just think it's fair that the people of Guam know why they made that decision. Simple as that. I don't think there's really anything hiding on any side here, but I just think it's reasonable that we would expect, as the committee chair asked for, just a determination by the Department of Public Health what it is that we think we need in our system for Guam. Because when we put that down in writing and then we go through the procurement, we are just making ourselves consistent. And then 5 years from now, if we don't have that, we're not going to be asking, did they ask for it? Did they not ask for it? Was that one of our criteria? Was it not? Was it something we didn't think of 5 years ago? Or we thought of it, and it was very clear. We tried to get that. That was not available, so we got this. Or whatever. Just those are the things. That's how we get better. And we have to have some kind of a record, or we're just going to make errors because the people changed. And we won't be able to improve. We'll just be starting from scratch every single time. The chairperson also had put in a 4-year limit, and that's debatable to me. I don't know if anybody knows what kind of limit we should put, but this puts none. It pretty much gives public health a complete blanket, meaning we might not ever have to review this contract to see if it ever was a good deal, or this is the best state that we should be going with, or this is the best entity for Guam, or that it's the most compatible. And I can't see why that's not reviewable. And I didn't see any explanation as to why 4 years would be an impediment. I don't know how long these contracts go, but if there's another term that's better, then we can do that. But I can't imagine that other states are going to set their procurements out for a very much longer time. We have seen issues in procurements similar to this, such as the GMH EHR system that they told us was going to solve their problems. It was a disaster. They were not able to implement it. They were not able to convert it. And I just think some of that is management's decisions that were made going along. And it should not be completely in one person's mind, because like I said, that person's going to change, just like we're seeing at GMH. And we should be able to just have, as we have in all of our procurements, a very objective goal, a very objective standard that everybody can see. That's it, transparent. We've seen the same thing with the FMIS, the new financial system, which that's kind of a disaster in itself for a while there because no one of our agencies was able to use the old system or the new system for a period there. And I can't see anyone who, in their right mind, when planning that, was going to plan that we would have a blackout period. So ensuring that these things have a good conversion system from one to the other, why would we not want that? Even if we're going from one old system to a brand new system, just make sure that we're going to be able to convert and that is thought of by public health and that we know. Because we've seen when we trusted, we asked, are we going to be able to convert over to the new system without any interruption? And they told us, absolutely, no problem. We are going to convert without any interruption. And we cannot afford an interruption when it comes to Medicaid. So I think that's perfectly fair to just require that public health show us that there will be how they're going to convert it, that it's a planned conversion and that they've taken care of any potential disruptions to operations. That's it. And we might be thinking, these people are smart. I know some of them, and they are very smart. And I give them tons of credit for pushing us to do this. But we can't read your minds. The public can't read your minds. Just put it down in writing is all that the procurement code requires. And that's, I think, all that the chairperson of the committee was trying to ensure. As we always try to ensure, value, open transparency, that we are fair, that we are going to be able to operate without disruption, and that if we have choices, that we make a record of how those choices were made. And it's clear to me, we're going to be joining with somebody, but we still have choices. And so I think it's very fair that we ask for those things. And I want to go forward with this bill. I really think the theory that we're going to convert or allow public health to get a system like this is perfect. Nothing wrong with that at all. I also think there's nothing wrong at all with the protection measures that the chairperson of the legislature's Committee on Procurement had tried to put into the bill. That's my thoughts on this bill. Cesar Masi.
Cesar Masi, Madam Speaker. On the main motion, is there any other senator who wishes to speak on the bill? If there's no one else who wishes to speak on the bill, the author may close. Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I do my closing, I want to do a point of information and the intent of the bill. It was literally to enter into MOUs with states having existing CMS approval contracts to expedite access to. We do have one vendor here on Guam, and right now that's DMR. We are only operating, we are operating without a contract. We do yearly purchase orders. And Mr. Speaker, or Ms. Speaker now, let me make this simple for those at home. What happens is if this bill fails, services will fail. What happens if this bill passes and you later discover a problem? Even though we never had a problem with EBT or WIC, you can always come back and change the law. What's more objective than a federally approved system chosen by other jurisdictions having proven that it worked. And again, this was not something that was made up. This was a request from the federal government, the Center for Medicaid Services. I am in no way, Madam Speaker, want to take away from the good work that the oversight chair did. With all due respect, and she can acknowledge that she came up to me. I didn't come up to her. Just the other day, and said she really wanted to work with me, and that she thought that even her thoughts of the procurement amendments that she put in may have been too restrictive. And I told her that I was going to do this bill, substitute the bill to its original form, and that I wasn't even going to take the recommendations of public health to add all the other programs. You know, Madam Speaker, in closing, more than 45,000 local residents rely on Medicaid for their health needs. This is why I felt it necessary to extend an existing authorization in local law for multi-state joint use contracts in order to make our government-backed insurance more reliable, more responsive, and more meaningful. Extending the intent of this lawmaking body, which is to save time and money while not sacrificing improvements to public health and social services programs and to DPHSS services and programs to the Medicaid program, is in line with the advocacy from both our local health department and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Enacting this extension will provide, Madam Speaker, a major financial benefit to Guam and our patients. Like I said, 45,000 patients out there. As our healthcare civil servants have explained, Guam taxpayers could pay twice as much if the system Guam Medicaid acquires on its own is not able to meet the CMS standards. What does that mean for patients, Madam Speaker? Benefits include faster processing. I'm going to repeat that because I think I went off guard. What does this mean for patients if this bill gets passed? Is that benefits include faster processing of claims and applications and more convenient online portal that will cut down processing times. This change also means that government personnel can be reallocated from manual processing tasks to customer service and case management rather than hire more employees. Madam Speaker, this bill, if passed, it will reduce the errors, delays, and other administrative burdens that come with paper-based applications and automate workflows to make multi-step processes easier to track and manage to completion. All of these improvements will bring down the risk of penalties related to the non-compliance of established timeframes, while also offering robust audit capabilities. Madam Speaker, this bill was literally at the request of CMS, not me. And I do take offense to say that I'm trying to undermine the oversight chair, because I am not. And I will not do that. That is not in my nature. I don't berate anybody. I don't say disparaging comments. And in this August body, the answer is how can we get to the number 8 to approve or disapprove a measure that gets on this August floor? And the magic number, again, is 8. I really hope that I was really hoping to have a unanimous vote on this, because literally it can save us millions and millions. When the Virgin Islands spoke, they said They paid 29 million, while Maryland paid 100-some million. Go figure. If we can make something work here, reduce time, pay our patients faster, better, get services better, work case management, have better customer service, then what are we doing not to promote a measure like this? In closing, Madam Speaker, I do want to extend my undangkol na masi to Senators Roy Canatha, Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Will Parkinson, Senator Jesse Lahan, my brother, Senator Frank Blas Jr., Senator Joe San Agustin, Legislative Secretary Amanda Shelton, and of course, Senator Dwayne San Nicolas, who is our son, and I really hope that he can bring some spirit into this, because I want to thank them for sponsoring this legislation and the need to see why it's important for Guam to tap onto this legislation. Madam Speaker, when tens of thousands of families need this coverage, when private clinics plus our own government hospital needs this revenue, we must do everything in our power to make Medicaid as efficient as possible. Now that our federal partners are recommending this strategy, and our local experts have concurred that this bill is needed in order for Guam to take advantage of these partnerships, it makes sense for the legislature to respond accordingly. And Madam Speaker, I'd also be remiss if I didn't at least take the time to thank Public Health and the efforts and the work that Public Health does. You know what? When they asked for this, and it was brought up to my attention, I said, what better way than what can I do to help and assist? When we look at over 45,000 patients who are out there with Medicaid, Medicare services, what better way to join a successful program that is existing all over in the United States? I ask my colleagues to reconsider this and vote for it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this measure, and at this time I ask that we move it down to the third reading voting file.
On the motion to move the bill as amended by committee and substituted on the floor to the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion passes. All right, Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move to recess until 8 a.m. Friday.
All right, tomorrow's a holiday.
Tomorrow's a holiday.
Independence Day, happy Independence Day, and 8 a.m. on Friday.
8 a.m. Friday to resume the second reading file.
Senator Brown on that motion?
I just want to ask, Madam Speaker, because I know we have an important burial ceremony for our ancient remains in our neighborhood. Vice Speaker and I are, it's been something we've been waiting for quite some time, and I think it's an important ceremony. So I just wanted to ask, I would like to attend. I think there's some of us who would, because I think it's something we've waited for, and certainly the reburial of our ancient remains. Session's important, I'll be here, but at the same time, it's something those of us certainly in Pago Bay have been waiting for since that Pago Bay Resort development was constructed quite some years ago. So I just wanted to ask, because I would like to attend that ceremony.
Yes, Madam Speaker, a point of information. It was discussed between the two of us to have session at 8 o'clock so that we could possibly take a break for the senators who want to attend at 10 o'clock.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate the information being provided. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mrs. Mossy.
And then just for the body's information as well, the judiciary has invited all of us to their award ceremony and celebrations in the afternoon, and so we want to make accommodations for that as well, the Justicia Award, annual award ceremony.
All right. Mrs. Mossy, Majority Leader, on that motion to recess until 8 a.m. on Friday after the holiday, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries. So recess until 8 a.m. Friday. Please celebrate safely. Happy Independence Day.